Okay, it's time to deal with Erdtree. This is an absolutely ginormous $40 DLC for Elden Ring. It is the only bit of DLC that Elden Ring is supposed to get, and it's been an interesting launch. Before it came out, there were reviews. The reviews were essentially, well, they were completely glowing, like mostly in the 8s, in the 9s. Now, there were a few reviewers who were criticizing the difficulty, and before launch, some of them certainly got a little bit of internet flack for criticizing that difficulty. Things got interesting, though, when the game dropped onto Steam and its score dropped. Way down from the probably 95 most of us expected, down to the low 60s. And that's not just because it's a hard game, or maybe a game that is hard in ways that people didn't expect from Elden Ring. It's also because there were performance issues. Now, I've got really good news for it. I'm handing over this video to Matt. You may recognize him from a while back in our videos, but basically, he's our very own Souls-like demon. He's put a whole weekend into the DLC. So, over to Matt, and to keep the show on the road, here's today's sponsor. Boot.dev, longtime friend of the channel, who are going to teach you back-end web development, which is an amazing skill, in this case using Python and Go, which are damn good to know, and they do it the smart way. With Boot, you'll be writing a lot of code. They're an online self-paced platform that is always growing with new content being added, and they keep it fun. A lot of the problems you work through are inspired by role-playing games. The platform itself has got quests, levels, XP, achievements, and you can get 25% off your first purchase with my link and code, which is boot.dev/Bellular News. They have an incredible, very complete learning path, and to give you an example of how they kind of weave RPGs into things that we understand through their courses, you're doing things like developing and deploying a Pokédex. You're learning object-oriented programming by working through RPG combat examples. It's the sort of approach that leverages things that you already understand to help make these concepts click. And it's also supported by Boots, which is a AI chatbot that is actually amazing. Like, rather than give you the answer, it does a really good job of working you through the problem. I guess it actually feels like a feature made by pros in the field rather than some silly grift. And it's particularly awesome for unblocking you in something you're stuck on, but doing so without just telling you the answer. So, you can check out all of this at boot.dev/Bellular News, where code Bellular News gets you 25% off your first purchase. That's backed by their no questions asked 30-day money-back guarantee, and they've got free demos for all of their courses up online too. So, cheers, Boot, and let's get into the video.
Stop me if you've heard this one before. FromSoft have released a video game, and it's time for difficulty discourse once again. But this time is quite serious, because this is the most anticipated DLC from one of the most trusted and beloved developers of all time, and it has a 65% user review rating on Steam. Yeah, the difficulty discourse is real this time. So to start with, the OpenCritic score here, 94. 94 out of 100. Incredible. Fantastic. Basically everyone loved it except Eurogamer were 3 out of 5. They pointed out some issues that most people seem to disagree with. So to talk about what it actually is, it's basically a mini sequel, an expansion. In the way that PC players, we've wanted to return to expansions where it's the game we like, but a lot more of it, a lot more refined, a lot more confidence in the design. Not with Elden Ring, of course, but with a lot of games, you'll play a game and you'll really get into it. You'll really fall in love with the world. You'll get good at it. You'll really enjoy the peak of what it has to offer, and then it ends. But with expansions, it used to be, we get to give you, the player, more of it. So they've done that perfectly here, where they play with your expectations in fun ways with their design, with their complexity in dungeons. It's way more advanced on average, like their designs for levels and maps and things like that, with a lot more verticality, a lot more moving around to get to different places. It's very, very cool. And the narrative plays on what you understand about the game really heavily and really well. It doesn't assume massive understanding, but all of the little details, the lore people are having such a good time with this. It is fantastic. And even in difficulty terms, right? The progression is kind of smart on paper. It's gated inside the expansion. So if you come in to Elden Ring, doesn't matter if you're soul level 100 and something or soul level 500 and something, you can hop in, and as long as you've beaten Mog, you'll be able to get in. You'll be able to enjoy this. You'll be able to play right away without some bullshit, right? Because, obviously it's behind that boss. It is more endgame. It is substantially more endgame. So this is the highest rated DLC of all time. The previous champion was Witcher 3 Blood and Wine, which won a Game of the Year for being such a good DLC. It won RPG Game of the Year at one point. And, they have this incredible illustration of, Geralt beating Mog to go, yep, this is it. You get the crown now. Congratulations. You definitely deserve it. And, they'll love it for sure. That on top of Elden Ring being 25 million players just announced before the launch of this DLC. This is culture. This is huge. Elden Ring is a success unlike anything else that was previously niche before. It's unbelievable. And that's only going to improve. That's only going to increase because this game is a top seller, has been the whole weekend. People are diving in, even though you see that mixed review thing. Even like player numbers, everyone's here, everyone's back. Even if only like 35% of people on Steam can actually get in, people are still playing, people are loving this. It's kind of nuts. Where does the review score come from then? Like 67% review rating. So I've obviously hinted difficulty is one part, where there's a huge amount of people saying it is literally too hard. That's one thing. The other thing, obviously a very serious thing, performance, right? So we'll break this down overall to see. There's like a third of the audience rejecting it. We look at the language breakdown, and it is English 83% positive. It's dragged down very heavily by other languages, with specifically the Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese being some of the lowest reviews. Some of that being cultural differences, right? But the English reviews are where we're going to be able to read what's going on. And a lot of it is performance. A lot of it is the age-old story of FromSoft. They made the PC port. Look at Dark Souls 1, right? Look at Dark Souls 1. It made its way to PC after a couple of years. It had Games for Windows Live, which was an absolute nightmare to work with. Terrible experience. Then Durant came and solved the problem, basically made the game playable with mods. Did the same again for Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3, which were also not great ports, slightly improving all the time. Then you get Bloodborne on PS4, runs terribly and miserably, which is insane for being like, a console exclusive. You'd think Japan Studio would have been able to solve that. No, FromSoft apparently just have, they are not spec'd into high technical capability a lot of the time. So what does that look like then? That looks an awful lot like the usual, right? You've got, that's a spell effect. Why am I at 20 FPS? Cool. Oh, there's like 10 enemies on my screen and now I'm at 30 frames per second down from 60. Fantastic. That's cool. I really enjoy that. All of that like usual stuff. But there's also some other things like people having audio glitches. Now, I haven't experienced those myself. I've actually had like a pretty great time overall on PC. Not to go all works on my machine on you, but some people will be lucky and miss all of the problems that do exist. Unless you have, of course, a Steam Deck, in which case, too bad. Despite Elden Ring being one of the top 10 games on Steam Deck, since it was verified, it's kind of just broken. It doesn't run very well. You're going to have all issues under the sun, including one major issue where if the game's suspended for 5 minutes, it stops eating inputs until restart, which is a massive pain in the ass. That one's been acknowledged, so hopefully it's fixed. But again, it's like, this is another case of a PC port. Needed more time in the oven, realistically. But the thing that we're going to talk about today a little bit more, because, you can only talk performance issues so much as, stop letting this happen, please. For the love of God, stop. The other thing then is the difficulty discourse, is the difficulty. And people are literally saying it is way too hard. An awful lot of it is, this is literally too difficult. And some of that boils down to the design, right? To this being more endgame Elden Ring, not more what's a cross section of Elden Ring. Put that in, more focus on the late game, on the end game, because despite this being an incredibly beautiful DLC in a whole bunch of ways, being like some of the most beautiful vistas, some of the most beautiful areas, some of the most well-designed areas and smartest areas, and like they're trying things that are really different as well, and I won't spoil anything, but they're really fantastic areas. It's beautiful, it sounds beautiful a bunch of the time, the music is excellent, enemy design is incredible, realistically, but also kind of brutal, same with bosses. And this is where we run into some problems, right? I think the biggest problem realistically boils down to this, and I guess the fallout, the after effects, the aftershocks of this. We'll explain it using a very fun Google translated Chinese review, which is Miyazaki Hidetaka participated in the Japanese college entrance examination when he was young. When he opened the door, he ate a flying grass from the invigilator. I assume that'll mean some sort of attack. The invigilator began to shine brightly and dance around, obviously being an allegory for a boss at this point. Miyazaki wanted to answer the questions, but he was locked on and he could only shake his head 360 degrees. He finally looked at the question, and it was university difficulty question. He needed to collect the test paper fragments before entering the exam room to change it to a middle school difficulty question. And this may sound nonsensical, but trust me. I'll also mention that Chinese reviews tend to be, according to Daniel Ahmad here, is that Steam reviews are often more of a comment section because the community doesn't exist there, and there's obviously the firewall. So any outlet they can possibly have to communicate, they'll use it for commenting purposes, as well as games being unfair in their design has particularly been a negative thing for Chinese players, especially when a lot of the guides are going to be English focused. So they're going to not have to the same degree of, oh, there's a problem, how do I solve it? So having played a good like 20 or so hours of it over the weekend, not quite at the end of it, but maybe half, 2/3 of the way through, and having problems, but then learning to love those problems and kind of understanding it all. Here's what I think the issue with difficulty is, and it's multifaceted, right? There are two major components, maybe three, that are pushing the problems here. And the number one is their answer to a problem, right? The shadow tree, blessings, right? And these are, you pick up fragments from around the world, usually in the same way you would get, the golden seeds or the sacred tears from churches and from like little growing earth tree fragments. You would get those and they would give you more flasks, or they would give you flask upgrades. It's similar, but this is just flat scaling. So if you get one more rank of the shadow tree blessing, you'll deal an extra 4% damage and take 2% less damage. That scales the whole way up to plus 20. Which means that's an extra 80% damage and taking 40% less damage, which is crazy. That is like an obscene difference. That is really, really brutal scaling. Because especially like you're playing, Elden Ring, you're often on a knife's edge anyway. If you can kill the enemy 10% faster, that's 10% less time for you to make a mistake and die. If you can make that 20%, that's a massive difference. And often you'll play those games and find that one level of an item of a weapon upgrade will change the game for you because of your extra damage output, or even squeezing in one extra attack. That's going to make all the difference. So this is their answer to basically huge variance in player power coming in. Like I was 120, 130 when I came in, reasonably low. I just kind of eked out a victory on Mog and came in. But then other people have been going in at soul level 500 and having a much similar time, I should say, instead of the difference you would expect from that variance. So this is their like blanket on top to crunch all the numbers down. But what they did to make that in such high numbers feel right, they've given massive amounts of health and damage to basically all enemies and bosses. So the result of that is, unless you explore loads to get the fragments, to get these blessings, the way that the Elden Ring experience is, you do the main quest, you're going to fight, you're going to like skip a lot of the side bits that scale more like flatly. You're going to go from leap to leap to leap. In this case, if you go straight to one of the major areas, you're going to fight Rolana, the Twin Moon Knight, and get your ass handed to you repeatedly. Then you're going to go and naturally, in the same way a lot of players did in Elden Ring, oh, I hit Margit. Margit's kicking my ass. What do I do with this? Oh shit, I guess I'll go the other direction. And that was very nicely like set up, where you was literally go left to get destroyed by a boss, go right to explore the rest of Limgrave. You could do that. This does the same, but less obviously and less interestingly, because these fragments, these blessings, aren't as fun as getting a new weapon, upgrading a weapon. They're less natural. They're more obvious game designer hand. You can see them tweak the numbers as you're playing, as opposed to actually experiencing them properly. That's one of the major problems. Literally a kind of, I don't want to call it lazy. They clearly went to make it all work, and it's on paper it's an elegant solution to the variance in player power, but it just hasn't resulted in a great experience for a lot of people. The other major part is boss design and enemy design, where this is more endgame Elden Ring. This isn't more Limgrave. This isn't even more Caelid. This is more Consecrated Snowfield. This is more, this boss shows up and will not let you breathe. They have insane varying rhythms and timings on their block strings. So like Millennia, right? You fight Millennia. I'd say you go back to fight Millennia now after doing the DLC and you'll find her easy. Because what she did an awful lot of was slightly varied attacks and block strings that would change, to use fighting game terminology. She could go like A, B, A, B, C, or like A, C, C. You know which attack they use with different timings. So you have to wait and watch for the last second. You can't learn the whole string very easily. You can't go, oh, well, she raised her right arm or whatever else, so I know I'm supposed to go dodge, half beat, dodge, beat, dodge. Like that's one of the things that you learned playing FromSoft games. You learn that kind of rhythm of dodging. But Elden Ring decided to be harder on average and have a lot more of varying rhythms, have a lot more of trying to bait you, trying to feint, trying to get you to roll so they'll hit you at the end of the roll. Margit was one of the best examples of that with his big falling attack thing. That was, he hung in the air for longer than you expected, longer than his animation was telling you to hit you. You learned not to dodge on the anticipation of the animation. You learned to dodge on the swing through and the follow through of it. And they've taken that to the nth degree. These bosses do like 5, 6, 7 swings in a row, anywhere between 3 to 7. Any order they'll like mix and match their attacks. So you never get to learn a pattern. You have to focus the whole time. You cannot autopilot at all. That, as well as every like hitting you for 60, 50, 40% of your HP, depending on your blessings, means it's really, really punishing. You're walking a tightrope at all times in these boss fights, unless you maxed out your blessings and playing very defensively. So people coming in who are used to glass cannon builds that worked in Elden Ring, they're just getting their ass handed to them. One errant attack will knock them down. They'll lose their pacing and die over and over again. That's very compelling if you like that. That's compelling if you love it. If it's not for you, it's not for you, and it's going to genuinely suck. For people who thought Millennia was too much, this whole DLC will be probably a non-starter until they learn to like get a guide for here's how to get as many blessings as possible at fighting bosses, which is a little bit too much. Because on top of that, like it's not just about dodging the right attacks, it's about dodging all the time. You get very limited room to go through. So I learned to basically just go, well, I've got the mimicked here, I might as well use it. Okay, I'll go for it. There's also like a version of the Shadow Tree blessings for Spirit Ashes, so they start off very weak as well, which is also a thing that bothers people, especially with like torrent health is applied to that as well. But a lot of what's worked for me with like the mimic tier and some other things is basically I've had to learn how to maximize damage to not have to fight bosses for 5-10 minutes at a time. It's genuinely kind of brutal in a way that I have come to very much enjoy. But for other people, and for people who aren't basically FromSoft perverts, it's going to be rough, which is interesting because here's my thought, right? It's incredible DLC, beautiful in every way. The level design's impeccable. The lore is horrible but beautiful. It's disgusting. Like, I actually felt ill at some point seeing something go down, learning what an area was about. The environments are beautiful, genuinely gorgeous. There's a place that doesn't feel like it fits in Elden Ring. It's too nice. The music's great. The new weapons as well, like Rellana's Twin Blades, is the most fun I've had with like a weapon since the Sword of Night and Flame. It is genuinely wonderful. But the scaling feels like bullshit, and it feels like they've just thrown a load of maths on top of a great design, which is a lot of the problem with a lot of RPGs today, is the mathematics taken away from the experience. And I think that more late game and end game bosses is good for people who really like end game Elden Ring, but it might contract the audience that they had expanded with all of the accessibility of Elden Ring. All of the, this is an RPG and the focus on RPG elements, and you can go and try a different build and try different stats and try different things. That's still there, but it's a lot less engaging because the answer is, oh, is the numbers too much? Go get the Shadow Tree Blessing. And that's just very unfortunate. And you can see the impact it's had on the review score, because I completely empathize. This game, DLC rather, is for less people than Elden Ring was. That's just the truth of it. So it is like the age-old debate of From Software games. I know Miyazaki talked to The Guardian recently about difficulty. Basically, you know, every game they've made since Dark Souls has been hard as hell, except for Deracine, but that was a VR game and no one played it. So he continues to say, you know, turning down the difficulty would strip the game of the joy of overcoming the hurdles, which would break the game. And that's true, but this is probably too far for most people. I love it. I love it mostly. I can be a little bit brutal sometimes. Took me maybe 4 or 5 hours to beat 2 bosses, just grinding attempts against them. I was Mesmer and Midra, and it was just, I need to go in until I learned to dodge the attacks in the right order and watch for them and not get greedy. And I felt amazing when I won, but it did suck for those few hours. It's a tough one, right? They want to make their games theirs, but, you know, they maybe push a little bit too far. So we'll have to see if like patches will come in and change this up, or if Miyazaki will stick. Because if I were them, I would definitely look at 67% reviews positive and go, have we made a mistake? Or is it something is it a blow they're willing to tank to remain who they are? Which is very, very, very interesting. But let me know what you think about this, because I think this is a very interesting problem, and I think one that is indicative of something that was just going to happen anyway, realistically, I think, with more Elden Ring. It's great, but is it the early part of the game is great? Is it the middle part of the game that's great? Or is it the end game? And I think the end game, as it is across a lot of genres, it's for a smaller amount of people than the rest of the game, and that's just something that bounced off. So let me know what you think about it. Do you think it's too hard? Do you think it's too easy? Have you had performance issues? Because I've basically had a great time. Let us know, and I will see you for, I'm sure, talking about another form of discourse that we all so very much love to break down.